The trucks rolled through the endless plains of Texas, raising swirls of golden dust that clung to every corner of the prisoners' uniforms. The sky stretched wide and merciless, a sheet of pale blue broken only by circling hawks and the shimmer of distant heat. Helena Bauer sat pressed between two women in the back of the truck, her wrists resting on her knees, her eyes fixed on the fence posts that appeared one by one along the dirt road. She had seen fences before, metal ones, wooden ones, barbed and cruel, but none that stretched so far into nowhere. When the convoy stopped, a guard opened the back gate and barked, "Out, ladies! Welcome to your new home." His voice carried neither warmth nor hostility, just exhaustion. Helena stepped down, boots crunching dry earth. A ranch spread before her, wide barns, a windmill creaking, fields dotted with grazing cattle. The air smelled of hay and sunlight, foreign and familiar all at once. She glanced toward the horizon, where a handful of men in wide-brimmed hats watched from horseback. Cowboys, she thought. Real ones, like in the American films she'd seen before the war. Their silence was heavier than the sun. One of them, a tall man with a limp, spat dust from his mouth and turned away. "Keep 'em in line," he muttered to another ranch hand. "They look soft." Helena straightened her back, refusing to appear broken. She was a prisoner now, but she would not let captivity strip her of dignity. The guards divided the women into groups, assigning them to barracks that once housed ranch workers. Inside, the air was thick with heat and wood smoke. Clara Neumann, a nurse she had met during transport, dropped her small bag on a bunk and sighed. "So this is America," she murmured, brushing dust from her sleeves. Helena managed a faint smile. "At least the roofs don't leak." That night, as the other women whispered in the dim light, Helena sat by the window. Outside, the sky was wider than any she'd ever seen, filled with stars so sharp they looked carved into the dark. Somewhere beyond the fence, a coyote called, lonely, wild, and free. She closed her eyes and thought of her brother Hans, missing somewhere in the east. The war had taken everything from them, time, family, even shame. Now it had given her this, a foreign sky, a fence, and a chance to exist beyond the front lines. For a moment she wondered what these Americans truly thought of them. Did they see monsters or women who had simply survived the wrong side of history? She did not yet know that this barren ranch would become a place of quiet transformation. If you love forgotten stories of courage and humanity in wartime America, subscribe now for more powerful tales. Stories that remind us that even in the darkest moments, compassion can take root in the dust. Helena leaned her head against the wall and listened to the wind sighing through the cracks. The fences creaked softly like old bones shifting in the earth. Somewhere outside, a horse whinnied, and she thought she heard a man's voice calling its name. Tomorrow she would see him, the cowboy with the limp, and the story neither of them expected would begin. Morning came wrapped in the scent of dust and boiled coffee. The ranch stirred slowly, like an animal waking after a long rest. Helena joined the line of prisoners marching toward the stables, the sun already biting at the back of her neck. She had never worked a ranch before, but the rhythm of labor was something she understood. Work meant order, and order meant survival. Evelyn Carter stood near the barn doors, clipboard in hand, her pale hair tucked neatly under a kerchief. "You'll keep the stables clean, mend what's broken, and stay out of the men's way," she said, her voice calm but sharp. Helena nodded, catching every third word, enough to grasp the meaning. The older woman's authority filled the air as naturally as the smell of hay. Clara whispered beside her, "She thinks we're servants." Helena replied quietly, "Better servants than prisoners behind iron." The stables were dark and warm, the scent of horses thick and alive. Helena's hands found purpose quickly, brushing, carrying, stacking. She noticed how the animals responded to her calm voice, their eyes softening, nostrils flaring as if recognizing something familiar. Around her, American ranch hands worked in silence, pretending not to stare. At midday, the women were given a short break under the shade of a mesquite tree. Tom Miller, barely older than 20, tossed a bucket of water toward them with a smirk. "Don't drink it all," he said. "Might run out before y'all finish whining." Clara bristled, but Helena simply lifted the bucket and drank, her eyes meeting his over the rim. "Thank you," she said in halting English. The boy froze, caught between mockery and shame. Evelyn, watching from the porch, gave him a look that needed no words. Later that afternoon, a sudden gust of wind swept through the fields, carrying dust like fog. Helena tied her scarf tighter and continued mending a broken fence. She glanced toward the ranch house, the porch shaded, rocking chairs still, a dog sleeping beneath the steps. For a moment, the scene looked almost peaceful, like a painting untouched by war. Evelyn approached her, boots crunching the dry soil. "You work well," she said slowly, testing the words for Helena's understanding. Helena straightened. "Work keeps mind quiet." Evelyn gave a small nod. "Quiet can be good, but don't mistake it for peace." Helena didn't fully understand the sentence, yet she caught its tone. Measured, not unkind. It lingered with her through the rest of the day. When the sun sank, the prisoners were led back to their quarters. The air cooled, and crickets began their steady chorus. Helena rubbed her sore palms and thought about the faces she'd seen. The boy's mockery, Evelyn's restraint, the other women's quiet endurance. There was tension everywhere, but beneath it ran something else, something unspoken. As she lay down that night, the sound of distant laughter from the ranch hands drifted through the open window. It wasn't cruel laughter, only ordinary, a sound of people untouched by the weight of guilt she carried. Helena turned on her side, facing the wooden wall, and whispered to herself in German, "Tomorrow, I will learn their rhythm." Outside, the wind rustled through the fields, and the ranch seemed to breathe, divided by uniforms yet bound by the same vast sky. Tomorrow would bring new tasks and new eyes watching her work. The morning began with a strange tension in the air, as if the wind itself carried news. The prisoners sensed it before anyone spoke. The ranch hands moved faster, the guards stood straighter. Helena noticed the change while carrying a bucket of feed to the corral. Dust swirled lazily across the yard until a dark pickup truck appeared on the road, its engine grumbling like distant thunder. When the truck stopped, a man stepped out slowly, his shadow long against the dirt. He wore a faded hat and a limp that marked each step. His left arm hung stiffly at his side, wrapped in a worn leather brace. The ranch hands straightened. Evelyn Carter came down from the porch, her face breaking into cautious relief. "Jack," she said, her voice soft but steady. Helena paused, her hand resting on the corral rail. So this was the cowboy everyone seemed to be waiting for. He looked older than his sister, with lines cut deep around his eyes and sun-darkened skin. Something about his presence, quiet but heavy, pulled the air tighter. "Didn't expect to see my ranch turned into a camp," he said, scanning the rows of barracks, his tone dry. Evelyn met his gaze. "War changes more than land, Jack. We do what we can." His eyes drifted to the women working nearby. "These are Germans?" "Prisoners," Evelyn replied. "They help keep things running." Jack's expression hardened. "Helping or watching? They work, same as us." Helena could not hear every word, but she read their faces, the familiarity of family, the distance of disagreement. When Jack's eyes met hers for the first time, she looked back without lowering her gaze. His stare wasn't cruel, only curious and tired. Later that day, Jack walked through the stables, inspecting everything with the practiced eye of a man who once belonged to this rhythm. Helena was there, brushing a young mare whose coat gleamed chestnut under the slanted light. The horse snorted and pulled away, nervous from the new presence. "She doesn't trust strangers," Helena said quietly in broken English. Jack stopped. "Neither do I." The words hung in the air between them. Helena's hand slowed, steadying the horse. "She learns," she said simply, and turned back to her work. Jack studied her movements, gentle, deliberate, with the kind of patience only hardship teaches. He didn't answer, just watched the way the horse began to calm under her touch. Outside, the wind carried the scent of rain that would never fall. The sky had darkened slightly, as if echoing something unspoken. Jack finally broke the silence. "You were a nurse, weren't you?" Helena looked up, startled. "Yes, before." She gestured vaguely, unable to find the word for war. He nodded. I fought in one. That small confession seemed to bridge a gap neither of them had intended to cross. Helena didn't respond, but her eyes softened for a brief second before returning to the horse. When Jack left the stable, he said to Evelyn, who waited outside, "They're not what I expected." Evelyn's reply was quiet. "No one ever is, until you see them work." As the sun dipped behind the hills, Helena leaned against the stall door, her heart uneasy. The cowboy's eyes had carried something she recognized: weariness, loss, and the dangerous spark of understanding. Tomorrow, she knew, the ranch would not feel quite the same. The mess hall was a long, low building, its wooden walls stained with decades of smoke and steam. At mealtime, the German prisoners lined up in silence, their tin trays clattering gently as they passed through the line. The food was simple: beans, cornbread, the occasional piece of boiled meat, but it filled the hunger without insult. Helena sat across from Clara, chewing slowly, as the room buzzed with the low hum of utensils and quiet conversations. Across the hall, the ranch hands ate separately at their own table near the far window. Jack Carter was among them, seated slightly apart, his gaze distant, though occasionally drifting toward the women. Clara pushed her cornbread to the side. "They give us crumbs," she muttered, "like dogs." Helena shook her head. "We eat, we live. That is enough. For now." Clara's voice dropped, bitter, "but don't mistake silence for acceptance." Helena looked around. No one laughed. No one raised voices. The air was too still, as if everyone feared their own thoughts might echo. Suddenly the door creaked open, and Tom Miller walked in, holding a fresh tray. He passed by the women's table and stopped. Without a word, he set an extra piece of cornbread in front of Helena. A flicker of something unreadable crossed his face, guilt perhaps, or defiance. Then he turned and returned to his seat. Clara stared. "What's that supposed to mean?" "I don't know," Helena said, her voice low. "Maybe nothing." But something did shift. The cornbread sat on her tray like a quiet offering. She tore a piece and held it out toward Clara, who hesitated before accepting it. That night, as they walked back to the barracks, the gravel crunched underfoot like brittle bones. The air had cooled, and the stars blinked in their usual silence. Helena caught sight of Jack near the stables, speaking softly to one of the horses. He didn't see her, or perhaps he did and chose not to react. Inside the barracks, a few women played cards using handmade pieces, the soft murmur of German blending with the creaks of wood. Helena lay on her cot, staring at the ceiling, feeling the cornbread's strange weight still lingering in her stomach. What did it mean, a gesture so small, a slice of bread, shared between enemies? Was it kindness or shame, or simply routine disguised as mercy? The next morning, Evelyn met Helena near the tool shed, a worn cloth bundle in her hand. She opened it to reveal thread, a broken rein, and a cracked leather strap. "You fix things," she said. Helena nodded. "Yes." They worked side by side in wordless efficiency. After a while, Evelyn spoke again, her tone softer. "I used to sew with my mother during the drought. No rain, no crops, nothing but stitching holes." Helena's fingers paused briefly, then continued. "War makes many holes." Evelyn didn't reply, but her eyes flickered with something like agreement. That night, bread was passed again. This time, quietly, between more hands. Not everyone approved. Whispers rose like smoke, faint but growing. But Helena said nothing. Bread didn't need words. And the silence that followed was no longer empty. It was waiting. The storm rolled in without warning, one of those sudden Texas tempests that seemed to rise straight out of the earth. The sky turned a dull bronze, the wind shrieking like it had something to prove. Dust surged across the ranch in thick sheets, erasing the horizon and choking every breath. Helena had just stepped outside the barn when the first gust hit, nearly knocking her sideways. She covered her mouth with a cloth and stumbled toward the stable doors, where Clara and two other women were trying to close the gates against the wind. "Get inside," Clara shouted, her voice barely audible over the storm. A terrified whinny pierced the chaos. One of the foals, a small chestnut with a white blaze, had broken loose from its pen and now bolted into the open yard, eyes wild, coat flecked with sweat and grit. Helena didn't hesitate. She ran. "Helena!" Clara called after her, but the wind swallowed the name whole. The ground shifted beneath Helena's boots as she pushed through the dust, hands outstretched. The foal skittered, nearly slipping on the packed earth. In the distance, a door slammed open. Jack, coat whipping behind him, was already sprinting toward them. Helena moved slowly, whispering in German, then in English, anything gentle enough to carry through the storm. "Easy, shh, no fear." The foal froze, ears twitching, and Helena crouched low, hand extended. She could feel its panic, its chest heaving, its legs trembling like dry reeds. Inch by inch she approached. Then Jack was there, circling wide. "Don't scare it," Helena said, her voice hoarse. "I'm not the one chasing it," he muttered, though his steps mirrored hers, slow, controlled. Together they flanked the animal. Jack's hand reached the halter just as Helena pressed her palm to its neck. The foal shivered but didn't bolt. For a second the three of them, man, woman, animal, stood still in the eye of a roaring world. They led it back to the stable, where Clara and the others slammed the doors shut behind them. Inside it was dark and loud, the roof groaning under the weight of wind and flying grit. Jack turned to Helena, breathless. "You could have been trampled." Helena wiped her face. "So could you." A pause, then a smile. Just a flicker. "Fair point." He looked down at the foal, now trembling but safe in the stall. "You're good with horses." "I understand fear," she said. "They do too." The storm passed after nightfall, leaving behind silence and broken branches. The next morning the ranch hands found the fences bent and some trees down, but no animals missing, no one hurt. Word spread quickly about the German woman who chased down a foal in the middle of the storm. Some shrugged, others nodded quietly. Tom said nothing, but when Helena passed him later, he gave a brief nod she almost didn't catch. At supper, the cornbread was warmer, the glances less sharp. Clara sat beside her, arms crossed. "You're becoming a favorite." Helena didn't answer. She only looked out the window, where the wind had finally gone still. Something had changed in the dust. The sky had cleared, but the air still carried the scent of storm-damp soil. Helena moved through the morning with quiet focus, her hands steady, her steps measured. In the wake of the foal's rescue, things had softened only slightly, but enough to notice. A few of the ranch hands offered words now, clipped but civil. Even Evelyn allowed a faint smile when Helena passed, but not everyone welcomed the shift. In the laundry shed, steam clung to the windows, fogging the small space where Helena and Clara scrubbed linens side by side. The water was warm, the silence warmer. Then Clara spoke. "They think you're one of them now." Helena didn't pause. "No one thinks that. You talk to them. You work like you belong here. We are here. Working changes nothing about who we are." Clara dropped a sheet into the basin with a splash. "You've forgotten why we wear these uniforms, why they built this fence." Helena wiped her hands on her apron. "No, I remember too well. That's why I don't want to hate anymore." Clara turned to her, eyes sharp. "Do you think kindness erases what they've done, what they are?" Helena's voice didn't rise. "What about what we've done, Clara? Are we so innocent?" The words hung there, heavy and raw. Clara looked away. The steam hissed. Outside, the fence line stretched across the field, silver wire gleaming in the sun. Helena walked past it every day, but now she stopped. She stared at it as if seeing it for the first time, not just as a barrier, but as something built in the mind as much as the land. Later, Jack approached her near the water trough, carrying a bucket. "You ever ride?" he asked. Helena looked at him cautiously. "A little. Years ago." He nodded. "Thought so. The way you handle them. It's different." She hesitated. "Back home, horses were work. Not freedom." "Here," Jack said. "They're both." They didn't speak more, but something about the exchange lingered. Helena sensed that he was trying to understand her, not just as a prisoner, but as a person. It unsettled her. That night, Clara didn't speak. She turned her back in the barracks, the space between their cots wider than the ocean. Helena lay awake, staring at the ceiling beams. She thought of her mother's garden, of the nights Hans snuck bread under her door after she lost her job for defending a patient. She thought of all the fences she'd seen, concrete walls, bombed-out streets, unspoken rules between neighbors. Texas was full of fences, but the ones in her head were the hardest to tear down. The next morning she passed the stable and paused at the gate. The same foal stood there watching her, not afraid, not trusting, just waiting. She reached out, touched its muzzle lightly. From behind her, Jack's voice came, low, almost thoughtful. Most folks keep fences up because it's easier than rebuilding what's been broken. Helena turned. And if we build something new? He met her eyes. Then maybe we stop living like enemies. The foal snorted, brushing its head against Helena's arm. She smiled, just barely, but it was real. The envelope was thin and stained, the ink smeared just enough to hint at rain along the way. It arrived in a stack of others, passed from Guard to Evelyn, and finally to Helena through the silent exchange of glances. She held it like something sacred, her hands trembling as if the paper might crumble under the weight of what it carried. Her name was written in careful German script, no return address, just her name and the camp's designation. Clara watched from across the barn. She said nothing, but her eyes followed Helena all the way to the hayloft. Helena climbed up, away from the tools and the voices, away from the fences. She sat on a bale, the scent of straw thick in the air, and opened the letter. It was from her sister. The first line stopped her breath. Hans is missing. She read it again. Slower this time. There was no explanation, only the silence of uncertainty spelled out in careful phrases. Last seen outside Oral, no letters in months, the Red Cross unsure. Their mother was praying, their father was silent. Helena folded the letter in half, then again, until it was small enough to press between her hands. Her throat tightened, her chest hollowed out. Hans was her older brother, but he had always felt younger, sensitive, kind. The one who left flowers at her door on birthdays and snuck her books when she was ill. She pressed her forehead to her knees and let the tears come in silence. "Are you all right?" Jack's voice. She hadn't heard him come in. She wiped her face quickly, but her voice betrayed her. "Yes." He didn't push. Just climbed the last rung of the ladder and sat a few feet away, arms resting on his knees. "Letter?" he asked. She nodded. "From my sister." He didn't ask what it said. Instead, he looked out the window, where the late sun slanted across the yard in golden bars. "I stopped getting letters after Sicily. My wife said she'd wait. I guess she did, for a while." Helena turned toward him. "She left?" He shrugged. "Hard to keep writing someone who doesn't come home whole." Silence stretched. Then Helena whispered, "My brother. He may be gone." Jack didn't speak for a long time. When he did, it was quiet. That kind of not knowing, it digs deep. Helena nodded, her eyes raw. He was the good one. "They always are," Jack said. They sat there, two damaged pieces of different wars, saying little but understanding more than either expected. When Helena finally stood, she folded the letter carefully, tucking it into her shirt. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" "For not asking me to explain." He nodded once. Some things don't need translation. Later, in the barracks, Clara looked at her, not unkindly. "Bad news?" Helena just said, "News." She lay in bed with her back to the wall, listening to the wind rustle through the grass outside. That night, she dreamed of a train station, a coat left on a bench, and her brother's voice calling her name, but never reaching her. The night was unusually warm, the air thick and restless. Helena woke to muffled voices outside the barracks, low and hurried, like footsteps in mud. She sat up slowly, her pulse steady but alert. Clara wasn't in her cot. Helena rose and moved toward the door, slipping her boots on with practiced quiet. The moonlight spilled across the yard in silver puddles. 3 figures crept along the fence line, their shadows long and broken, Clara among them. Panic didn't come. Instead, Helena felt a cold clarity settle in her chest. She stepped outside and followed the edge of the building, careful not to be seen. Behind the tool shed, she caught them. Clara turned, startled. "Helena, what are you doing?" Helena stared at her. "I could ask you the same." The other 2 women, Marta and Inga, were silent. One held a coiled length of wire. The fence beyond them shimmered faintly in the dark. "We're leaving," Clara said simply. "You'll be caught." "Better caught than forgotten," Marta muttered. Helena's voice dropped to a whisper. "There are guards, dogs. You'll ruin everything for the rest of us." Clara's eyes flared. "You think this life is worth protecting?" Helena stepped closer. "No, but I think the people here are. Evelyn, Jack." "Even the boy who brought bread," Inga hissed. "You've gone soft." "Maybe," Helena said, "but not stupid." Marta pulled the wire from her coat. "We're going with or without you." Helena looked at Clara one last time. "Don't do this." But Clara's jaw was set. "They'll send us back eventually, to ruins, to nothing. We get out now. We choose our future." Helena shook her head. "You're choosing fear. And you'll bring it down on all of us." Without another word, she turned and walked away, every step burning. By the time she reached the bunkhouse, the world was silent again. She didn't sleep. At dawn, alarms sounded. Guards rushed to the fence. Whistles pierced the air. Helena stood at the doorway, watching the camp stir to chaos. Jack found her minutes later, face hard. "You knew?" She met his eyes. "I saw them go. I tried to stop it." His shoulders tensed. "Why didn't you tell someone?" "Because I didn't want them shot." He stared at her, jaw tight. "They breached the fence." "I know." Her voice didn't waver. "But they were desperate. That doesn't make them dangerous." A beat passed. Then Jack nodded once. "We'll find them. And if they're smart, they'll surrender before someone gets hurt." By noon 2 were caught. Inga and Marta, exhausted, scraped up, faces filled with dust and fury. Clara remained missing. That evening, Evelyn called Helena aside. "If anything like this happens again—" "I understand." Evelyn studied her. "Do you?" Helena hesitated. "I don't agree with what they did. But I know what it feels like to want out." Evelyn didn't argue. She only said, "There's more than one kind of fence. You chose the right side today." But Helena wasn't sure. That night, the gate was double-guarded. The other women watched Helena with a mix of confusion and silence. Some nodded, others turned away, and Clara was still gone. The sky darkened by late afternoon, turning the air thick and expectant. Clouds gathered like fists above the flat land, and the cattle grew restless. Everyone could feel it. Something was coming. By sundown, the wind had picked up again, dry and cutting, tugging at clothes and slamming doors. Helena helped secure the stables, tying ropes around loose boards. She could barely concentrate. Clara hadn't been found. Jack stood near the barn entrance, his face set like carved stone. "Storm's coming fast. Keep the door shut tight," he called to the hands. Lightning flashed in the distance. Helena turned to him. "Still no sign?" He shook his head. "No, but we've got eyes out past the ridge." A sharp crack of thunder interrupted them. The rain followed fast, first in fat, hesitant drops, then in sudden sheets. Within minutes, the yard turned to mud. Inside the barracks, the women huddled near windows, watching the storm tear across the ranch. The guards remained posted, wet and shivering, eyes scanning the dark beyond the fence. Helena paced, her heart pounding with something she couldn't name. Guilt, worry, fear for Clara and for everyone else. Then someone banged on the mess hall door. A figure appeared, soaked and staggering. A guard raised his rifle. "Stop!" Helena ran outside before she could think. "It's her!" Clara collapsed at the fence line. Mud streaked across her face, hair plastered to her cheeks. Helena reached her first, catching her just as she fell. "I didn't know where to go," Clara whispered, trembling. "I kept walking, but it was just fields, just fences." The guards pulled her up, but Helena stepped between them. She came back, Let her stand. Jack arrived, rain dripping from his hat. He looked at Clara, then at Helena. She come on her own? She did, Helena said. Clara nodded slowly. I did. The tension eased slightly. Jack gestured to the guards. Take her in, let her dry off, no shackles. The others stared as Clara was led inside. Some looked relieved, others confused, a few resentful. Later that night, Helena brought Clara a blanket. They sat in silence, the storm still murmuring outside. I thought I could disappear, Clara said. That somewhere someone would see me as more than a prisoner. Helena looked at her. You are more, but not by running. Clara covered her face. I was so sure we were right to leave. You were brave, Helena said softly, but sometimes staying takes more courage. For the first time in days, Clara didn't argue. The next morning, the sky was clean, bright with promise. The ranch lay battered but whole. The escape had failed, but no one was dead. Helena walked past the stable, pausing to watch the horses stretch their legs again. Jack leaned on the fence nearby. She came back, he said. Yes. She'll be punished. Helena nodded. I know. Jack glanced at her. But it won't be the same kind of punishment. Not this time. A breeze moved through the grass, gentle and dry. The storm had passed, but the air still held the weight of choices made in darkness. It started without ceremony, just a quiet morning with sun spilling gold over the hills. The storm had stripped the trees of weak branches, left the grass washed clean. The air smelled like earth and something softer, relief maybe. Helena was in the stables early, brushing the same chestnut foal she'd calmed weeks ago. Its coat gleamed now, stronger. She hummed under her breath, the sound low and steady. Jack appeared in the doorway. He leaned against the frame, arms crossed. You ever miss it? He asked. She looked up. Germany. No. Freedom. Her hands slowed. I'm not sure I remember what it felt like. Jack walked over, reached for a bridle hanging nearby. I've been thinking, he said. Horses don't care about flags or fences. Maybe it's time we stop acting like they do. Helena studied him. What are you saying? Pick 4 of your women tomorrow after chores. Bring them here. Why? He didn't answer, just gave her a look that said everything. The next day the sun climbed fast. Helena stood with Clara, Inga, Marta, and a 4th woman named Sophie. None of them spoke. Jack waited by the paddock, holding 5 reins. The other ranch hands watched from a distance, uncertain. Evelyn stood near the barn, arms folded but not intervening. Jack gestured. Mount up. Clara blinked. You're letting us ride? Just around the field. Under supervision. Call it trust if you want. No one moved at first. Then Helena stepped forward and took the reins of the mare she knew. Slowly, carefully, she climbed into the saddle. The others followed, each with hesitation, disbelief painting their faces. Jack mounted last. Keep close, he said. They rode, not fast, not wild, but with a freedom none of them had known since crossing the Atlantic, in shackles and silence. The horses moved like music across the open field, hooves drumming the dry earth, tails catching the wind. Helena leaned forward, her fingers curled in the mane. The wind bit her cheeks, and for the first time in years she laughed, sharp and real, cutting through the silence that had lived inside her. Clara pulled up beside her, breathless. I can't feel my hands. Good, Helena said, smiling. Means you're alive. Even Marta laughed, a dry sound that turned to something real. When they returned, dust rising behind them, the other women stood at the fence, watching. No one jeered, no one clapped, just silence and awe. Evelyn walked up to Helena as she dismounted. How was it? Strange, Helena said, like remembering a song you thought was lost. Evelyn nodded. Then maybe it's time we start remembering more things. That night, the barracks buzzed softly. Not with rebellion, not with fear, but with stories. Clara sat beside Helena, arms wrapped around her knees. Do you think they trust us now? No, Helena said. But they're learning to see us. The stars above the ranch blinked, steady and silent. Somewhere a horse snorted in its stall. and the wind rustled through the grass like breath. It wasn't freedom. Not yet. But it was the shape of something better, something waiting beyond fences and fear. The dust didn't settle after the ride. It lingered, curling around boots and whispers alike. Within days, everyone in town seemed to know German prisoners had been seen on horseback, riding freely across the Carter ranch. Helena first heard the rumors from a guard who spat the words like a warning. "You've stirred up a hornet's nest," he muttered. The shift was immediate. More eyes at the gate. Fewer nods from the hands. A letter arrived from the Army headquarters in San Antonio. Evelyn read it twice before folding it carefully and placing it on the kitchen table, her jaw locked tight. Jack sat across from her. What do they want? An explanation, a visit. They think we're training enemy riders? They think we've lost control. The silence stretched. Outside, the sound of hammering echoed across the yard, fence repairs from the storm still unfinished. Jack stood. Let them come. Let them see it for themselves. Helena could feel the change. The guards no longer met her eyes. Tom, who once nodded politely, now avoided her altogether. The trust they'd built felt brittle, like something that could be snapped with a careless hand. That afternoon, as she scrubbed the troughs, a ranch hand she didn't know well leaned close. You think just because you touched a saddle you belong here? Helena didn't flinch. I don't belong anywhere. He grunted. That's the first true thing I've heard you say. Later in the barracks, Clara kicked off her boots and fell onto her cot with a sigh. It was always going to come to this. They gave us too much, too fast. They gave us a moment, Helena said. And that matters, Clara turned to her. Even if they take it back? Yes. That night, Evelyn gathered the women in the mess hall. She stood beside Jack, the weight of responsibility making her look older than she had days before. We'll be having visitors soon, she said, from the military. No one spoke. They'll ask questions about the riding. About how things are run here. Marta crossed her arms. Will they punish us? They might punish us, Evelyn answered, but we don't regret what we allowed. You've worked hard. You've earned respect. That doesn't go away. Helena watched her, surprised at the firmness beneath the calm. Evelyn continued, I won't ask you to lie, but be honest. Show them who you are. Jack added, if we treat each other like enemies again, that's all they'll ever see. The women nodded slowly. Afterward, Helena stepped outside into the dark. Jack followed, stopping beside her. You think this was a mistake? He asked. She looked up at the stars. No. I think it was the first real thing since I got here. Even if it cost you? It already has. But it gave something back too. The wind picked up, whispering through the dry grass. Jack looked at her, his voice low. You've got more backbone than half the men I fought beside. Helena didn't smile, but she felt something shift. Pride, perhaps, or defiance, shaped by truth. In the distance, coyotes howled. The dust didn't settle. It was waiting. The army vehicle arrived just after sunrise, its tires carving harsh lines through the dry soil. 2 officers stepped out, one young, tight-lipped, clipboard in hand, the other older, his posture military sharp, but his eyes slower, scanning everything as if weighing the soul of the place. Evelyn met them at the porch, hands clean, voice firm. Captain Hollis. This is my ranch, the older officer nodded. Ma'am, I'm here to assess the status of your prisoner labor and security compliance. I understand there's been some deviation from protocol. Jack stood nearby, silent. Helena watched from the stables, heart thudding. The younger officer, Lieutenant Marsh, walked the grounds with a pen poised like a weapon. He noted the fences, questioned the guards, jotted remarks beside names. When he reached the barracks, Helena was asked to step forward. Your name? Helena Bauer. He glanced at his papers. German national, registered POW, nurse. Yes. And you were seen riding horses here? Yes. He looked up. Do you understand why that's an issue? Helena held his gaze. Because riding means trust. And trust is dangerous. The lieutenant blinked. Captain Hollis stepped in. "Why do you think they allowed it?" Helena's throat tightened. "Because we worked. We proved ourselves. Because they chose to see us as more than uniforms." The captain's face didn't change, but he said, "Interesting." They continued their inspection, stopping to question Marta, Clara, even Tom. The boy stumbled through his answer, avoiding Helena's eyes. Inside the house, Evelyn offered coffee. The officers declined. Hollis asked, "You understand the risk, public backlash? This could bring down federal oversight." Evelyn didn't flinch. "I understand that treating humans with dignity shouldn't be controversial," Jack added. "They've done nothing to warrant punishment." "They earned a sliver of normal, that's all." Hollis sat back. "And what if other camps follow suit? Where do we draw the line?" Evelyn's voice was calm. "Maybe the line isn't between us and them. Maybe it's between cruelty and decency." The captain didn't respond. He stood, adjusted his belt, and signaled to the door. Before leaving, he paused near Helena as she scrubbed a saddle clean. "You speak excellent English." "I learned it before the war," she said. "Why?" She looked up. "Because I believed the world was bigger than borders." His eyes flickered, but he only said, "Good day, Miss Bauer." By evening, the vehicle was gone, the dust of its passing still hanging in the road. Everyone waited. The letter arrived 2 days later. Evelyn read it at the table. Jack stood beside her. Helena lingered near the door, silent. "No sanctions," Evelyn said softly. "No action. They're closing the investigation." Jack exhaled. "That's it? Maintain standard guard procedures. Monitor interactions. No further deviation recommended." Helena smiled, faint but real. It wasn't approval, but it wasn't condemnation either. It was something like breathing again. Clara came to her that night. "You saved this place." Helena shook her head. "No, we all did, with hands and sweat and silence." Outside, the stars were scattered wide, sharp as glass. For the first time in weeks, no one looked over their shoulder. The fence was still there, but the fear was not. The announcement came on a cracked radio, the kind with knobs that stuck and static that never quite disappeared. Evelyn turned it up as the broadcaster repeated the news, in a voice too calm for what it carried. "Germany has surrendered. The war in Europe is over." The room fell still. No cheers, no clapping. Just the quiet weight of finality. Helena stood at the back of the kitchen, dishcloth in hand, her body frozen. Clara whispered, "Is it true?" Evelyn nodded. "They've surrendered." Outside, the ranch looked the same. Horses grazing, clouds drifting lazy above the barn. But inside every person, something broke open. The guards shifted uncomfortably, unsure whether to be relieved or on edge. Tom leaned against the porch rail, squinting at the horizon like he expected it to change shape. Jack came in from the barn, his hands dirty, brow furrowed. "They said it?" Evelyn nodded. He glanced at Helena. "You okay?" She didn't answer right away. "I don't know." The rest of the day moved strangely. The women continued their work, but slower, with less purpose. There were no commands barked, no corrections issued. Even the guards seemed reluctant to speak. Marta cried quietly behind the barracks. Inga sat alone under the mesquite tree, turning a stone over and over in her hand. Clara joined Helena at the trough. "We should be happy," she said. Helena rinsed her hands. "Should we?" "It's over." Helena looked up. "But what's left?" That night, Evelyn held a meeting in the mess hall. The women gathered, filling benches, shoulders brushing, breaths tight. "You'll be repatriated soon," Evelyn said. "Transport orders are coming." A murmur rippled through the room. Clara asked, "When?" "A few weeks, maybe sooner." Helena stared at the knot in the wood beneath her fingers. Home. The word felt foreign. What waited for her there? Rubble, graves, memories that refused to fade. Evelyn continued. "Until then, nothing changes. You work, you rest. You're safe." Afterward, Helena walked the edge of the fence alone. The wind moved softly, stirring the long grass. She stopped near the far post, the one where the foal had once bolted. Jack joined her without speaking. "They said the war ended," she said. "It did." She looked at him. So why does it feel like nothing ended at all? He kicked at the dirt. Because the world doesn't change in a broadcast. It changes when people do. They stood together side by side in the dark. Will you go back? He asked. Helena exhaled slowly. I don't know where back is. In the days that followed, routines resumed. Meals were served, fences were checked, horses brushed. But something in the silence had changed. The war that shaped them was over. But the scars remained, etched not on skin but in memory. One night Helena pulled out the letter about Hans, read it again. This time she didn't cry. She just folded it slowly and placed it in her boot. Not forgotten, just carried. The war had ended in silence, and silence somehow was the loudest sound of all. The orders came on a grey morning, carried in a manila envelope with an army seal Helena recognized instantly. Evelyn opened it without expression. The barracks were quiet, but every woman inside held her breath. You leave in 5 days, Evelyn announced. Train departs from San Angelo. You'll be escorted. No one cheered. No one moved. Helena sat on her bunk, hands folded. The moment she'd imagined for months felt hollow, like a door creaking open into a room she no longer knew. Clara whispered, 5 days. That's all? Helena didn't answer. Later that afternoon, Jack approached her at the stable. He held a folded piece of paper in one hand, worn at the edges. It's a letter, he said. She looked up. For me? No, from me, to whoever's in charge over there. It says you worked hard, that you helped more than hurt, might make things easier wherever you land. Helena took it slowly, the paper still warm from his hand. Thank you. He hesitated, then reached into his pocket again. This time, it was a small silver locket, the kind that opened to hold a picture or a prayer. It belonged to my mother, he said. She gave it to my sister. Evelyn gave it back to me after she passed. Helena froze. I can't take that. You're not taking it, Jack said quietly. I'm giving it. The metal was cool in her palm. She felt the shape of the engraving with her thumb, a tiny vine, delicate and precise. What if I lose it? Jack's smile didn't reach his eyes. Then maybe it finds its way into someone else's hands. And it keeps going. That night the women packed. Some cried. Others folded their uniforms slowly, with a reverence that surprised even them. Inga burned her extra socks in a small tin, muttering, I won't wear these in Hamburg. Marta left a note tucked under her cot. Tell the foal I miss her. Helena wrote nothing. She just stared at her hands, now calloused, steady. The morning of departure, Evelyn stood at the fence watching the women file into trucks. She kept her arms crossed, her face unreadable. Helena climbed in last, turning back. Evelyn stepped forward. Go home and live, she said. Don't waste what you learned here. I won't, Helena replied. Clara waved from the truck bed. Tom stood near the barn, eyes down, hands shoved in his pockets. Jack didn't come to the gate, but Helena saw him on the hill, standing alone by the corral. She raised her hand, slow and certain. He tipped his hat, just once. As the truck rumbled to life, the ranch shrank behind them. Helena clutched the locket tightly. She didn't know what waited across the ocean, but for the first time in years she didn't feel afraid of the unknown. The dust rose behind them, curling through the air like smoke from a fire long burned out. Some things would be left behind, but not forgotten. The wind still moved across the plains, just as it had that summer, carrying with it the scent of mesquite and sun-baked soil. Helena stepped out of the rented car, her shoes pressing softly into the red earth. The Carter Ranch hadn't changed much, at least not from a distance. The house stood where it always had, weathered but proud, the porch rails faded and familiar. The barn's roof sagged slightly, but the stables looked freshly painted. She walked slowly, each step careful. The years had not taken her strength, but they had softened her pace. No one greeted her. She hadn't called ahead. The fence, the one that once cut sharp lines through everything, duty, identity, guilt, was still there. But it was no longer mended. The barbed wire sagged in places. Tall grass grew through it. Thistles curled around the posts. It no longer separated anything. Helena ran her fingers along the wood, rough beneath her touch. Most folks forget that was ever a prison. The voice came from behind. She turned. Jack stood near the stable, older now, a silver streak running through his beard, but his stance was unchanged. Helena smiled. "And you?" He shrugged. "I don't forget things that mattered." They walked side by side to the old corral. A few horses grazed nearby, tails flicking at flies. One of them lifted its head and ambled closer. "She looks like the foal," Helena said softly. Jack nodded. Same line, strong as ever. They stood without speaking for a while, letting the silence settle between them. It wasn't the silence of before, the heavy, fearful kind. This one was lived in, earned. Jack reached into his coat and pulled something from the inside pocket. A folded piece of paper. "Evelyn's obituary," he said, "last winter." Helena took it gently, eyes skimming the print. "She kept us alive," she whispered. "She made sure this place stayed decent, even when no one was looking." Helena looked up at the horizon. "I never sent a letter. I didn't know what to say." "You said enough," Jack replied. "When you stayed, when you left." She reached into her own coat then, pulling out the silver locket, worn but intact. She held it out. "It's yours." He took it slowly, cradled it in both hands. "She would have liked you," he said. "My mother. She liked people who didn't give up." They walked the fence line together. Wildflowers had taken root in the dirt, bluebonnets mostly, growing between the old posts. "I used to wonder if we were ever really free," Helena said. Jack looked at her. "We weren't." "Not then. But now. Now we know what to do with it." The sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the fields. Helena turned to face the land one last time. "I'll be going," she said. "You'll come back." "I will." If this story touched you, subscribe now to our channel for more powerful tales of forgotten humanity. And don't forget to click the video on your screen. The next journey is waiting. Because some fences were never meant to last, and some rides, no matter how short, stay with you forever.